Eugene Kirpichov, welcome to Climate Swings. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So, the standard opening question that I like to lob at my guests is to ask you for a brief self introduction, a couple of key points about your background, and what you're doing now in a nutshell.
Sounds good. So, by background, I'm a big tech guy. I think I used to say that almost all of my career was in big tech, but that's not the case anymore. Now, only three-quarters of my career were in big tech because I've been running work on climate for 5 years now. So, yeah, basically, my path was that I spent about 15 years in different flavors of big tech between Russia, where I'm from, and the US. About half of that I was at Google. I was working on Google's data processing infrastructure and spent some time at Google AI as well. And over time, I learned enough about climate that I had the moment of awakening and decided that it is morally and emotionally intolerable for me to keep working on something that has no bearing to solving the greatest problem that we're facing. And so in 2020, in summer of 2020, I met my colleague Cassandra, who was in the same boat, also at Google AI. And within a week of starting to talk about this, we talked each other into quitting Google together. And then, I published a goodbye note. And the next morning, I see that 500,000 people have read my goodbye note, and hundreds of them are emailing me and saying that they want to work on climate too, because they are also feeling, a lot of despair or grief or fear about climate, and they want to do something about it. So that's why we decided to start work on climate. We wanted to help these people and harness this passion, and we started a little online community. Looks like we struck a chord or hit a nerve or whatever you want to call it, because the community rapidly grew to be the largest community in the world of this sort. And that is still what I'm doing today. But there have been a lot of, you could say, twists or swings in what that work actually means and how we do it. So I think we'll get to that later today.
Eugene, I'm so happy. You might be the first guest that actually adopted my vernacular of swing rather than like pivot or twist. You said twist, but the swing is what I like to emphasize, especially in this podcast with guests like you. So we will get to work on climate, of course, and I think a lot of my listeners will probably be fairly familiar with it, or maybe they've heard of it, they've come across it in their feeds. But let's go way back to your early days. You're obviously born and raised in Russia. You were essentially a big computer geek, basically, in your college and education days, and then in the early part of your career. So, what were your career motivations like? What did you see your career becoming in those early days in your education and beginning setting out in your professional life?
Yeah, I was just having great fun. It was so I think by now that I'm no longer a software engineer, it is not so arrogant of me to say that I was a really fucking good software engineer. So I really really liked doing it. I was very good at it. I really enjoyed the experience of solving problems once and for all, like really cracking straight at the heart of a complex mess of problems, and then you find like just the right spot to hit it, and the whole thing breaks down into 1,000 much simpler pieces. And it's almost a spiritual experience when that happens. So I was having that experience over and over and over in different contexts, and I was really enjoying learning, solving unsolved problems in the areas that I was working in. So my motivation was basically to keep doing that, keep building my mastery of this, keep doing things that haven't been done before in that space. And certainly it wasn't hurting that big tech pays absolutely obscene amounts of money that nobody should be making. But when you're there, you don't realize that nobody should be making that. So for me, it was a nice to have, obviously, as well.
Yeah, Russia has a pretty strong culture of technology and especially computer programming, I think, right? So when you were growing up, I presume there was a strong element of, the community that you were in sort of driving you in that direction, presumably as well.
Yeah, for sure. I studied at one of the kind of main schools focused on math, physics, and computer science in St. Petersburg, and I think this was really a big part of it. So we were all nerds about this at the school. So I did carry that sense of identity of, being a nerd about math and computer science and bonding with my math and computer science nerd buddies about problems in this area. So yeah, it's a really big deal. Like this sense of identity, I think this is really what keeps people in their current jobs as opposed to impact work, probably even more than golden handcuffs.
Yeah, I mean, I presume at the time there wasn't really a sense that you were interested in kind of doing something from a broader societal perspective, even though doing computer programming can obviously plug into many different aspects of solving societal problems. But like, what were the like early, I guess, like sort of roles that you actually held, say before you ended up at Google? What was kind of like the main texture of your work at the time?
Yeah, it was really all software engineering roles. So when it comes to paid work, all of the paid work I did was software engineering. I did a bunch of it at Yandex, which is Google's competitor in Russia and now much of Eastern Europe. Did some work at another, cloud company. But when it comes to impact work, so I think for a long time I had, some inclination to the good. I think I inherited that from my grandma, like really a visceral sense of duty. I was channeling that sense of duty into extracurricular activities. For example, while I was back in Russia, I was quite active in basically serving as an election observer during elections and seeing, all the stuff that the Russian government is doing to falsify election results right there in front of my eyes. Uh, you know, Donating to different charities related to causes that I cared about here and there. But yeah, nothing that I was really going all in with my professional strengths.
And when you moved to the US, was that for the Google role or did you come prior to joining Google?
It was before Google. It was for my role with another company that I was with called Mirantis.
I
Yeah,
see.
and
And go ahead.
yeah, and then about I think pretty shortly after coming, I actually ended up ended up moving to Google.
I see. Okay. So you came for a job basically, and then that job became the Google job, which is kind of, very prominent on your resume, obviously still, and something that you've talked about quite a bit. Um, Did when I mean when I guess comparing the Russian context and the American context, and you said obviously at that time in Russia things were quite different, and you could do things like probably go observe elections and whatnot. Uh, the sense of your career being about impact and trying to do good, was that sort of when you started to cultivate that, or was it still mostly about I want to be the best damn software engineer that I can be?
I think it was more about the latter, but I think I sincerely believed that what I'm doing is good. So, like, certainly I understood that I'm not saving the world with my work, but when I asked myself, like, why am I doing this? Why am I building this, big data stuff? And I told myself, well, I'm doing it because it could be used for science. Or like, why am I doing this work at Google AI that is about efficiency of software systems? Well, because the systems that Google builds are good. And if I make them more efficient, they'll serve the world even better. So that is how I was justifying it to myself. And like in retrospect, that sounds ridiculous, but but I really believed it at the time.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of people who continue to, still
Yeah.
are at Google or at these big tech companies who believe these kinds of mantras, essentially, these kinds of ideals about the work that they're doing. And obviously, when you moved over to Google, you believed it too. And Google has a highly vaunted sense of purpose among kind of its corporate history. At least maybe in recent years things have changed a little bit, but at least
They have.
in the time that you moved over, which I believe was 2013, is that right? Yeah. So I think it was still among employees, presumably the general public, leadership, still considered a highly idealistic company. Is it? That's
Yeah,
pretty accurate to
it's
say.
yeah, and by the way, I don't mean to cast dirt at Google. I still have a lot of respect for it, and I think a lot of my maybe work ethic or maybe my sense of what is good actually was built through contact with really really good and highly ethical moral people that I met at Google. Just in retrospect, as I'm reflecting on like what kind of force is big tech out there in the world, and my perception of that is very different than when I was on the inside.
Yeah, so tell me about that move over to Google and, the kind of work you did there.
Yeah, I joined Google in 2013. At the time, so I joined the team that builds Google's large scale data processing tools. And before that, I've been reading their papers and basically, all but, praying to the stages of people who wrote those papers. So I was absolutely in awe when it turned out that this is the team Google wants me to join. And it was pretty much just as fun as I thought. We were building, new generations of data processing technology. Really fascinating stuff. Lots of problems that other people, for some reason, haven't solved, probably because they don't have, Google's unlimited resources. Um, yeah, I don't really know that there is much more to it. That's what I was doing there.
And then you snap your fingers and 7 years just like goes by in a flash, basically.
Kind of, yeah. So I think the only really transition point work-wise was when I shifted from that to working on Google AI. I think I kind of concluded that I have done what I wanted to do in the data processing space and started looking for what else can I do. And at the time, machine learning and AI were really starting to pick up. So my partner had a big health issues at the times, so I had a bunch of free time while taking care of her, and I did a lot of reading about it, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I really like it, and I think now I know I've learned enough that maybe I stand the chance of getting in one of those teams, and that is exactly what happened. So I applied to one of those teams internally and got the job. So then we were working on building infrastructure that basically automatically makes all kinds of systems more efficient. Yeah,
Right.
also.
Yeah, right. But you didn't end up staying at Google, obviously.
I
You
did not at
mentioned
all.
how in 2020 you went through a pretty significant career change. But I guess there were, I mean, these kind of like climate swings, as I call them, right? Like they seem to kind of like emerge out of nowhere, but they're obviously like the product of like, everything that's kind of built up from you
Mhm.
basically, since the very beginning. So, can you talk about some of like the early exposure that you had to climate change, either in Russia or here, in and out of your career, just what you were thinking about it up until say like, the few years before that you decided to leave and found work on climate?
Yeah, so for a long time, until maybe like 2016, 2017, I didn't know anything about it, or at least I don't remember thinking about it at all. Then I think my first contact with this was that my partner at the time was an environmental scientist, and she held a lot of very strong opinions. And I think my reaction to those strong opinions was a little bit defensive on the inside. So I got exposed through that, but it didn't, propel me to any kind of action. I was like, "Oh, that's cool, very interesting. Tell me more." But I
And
wasn't.
just to clarify, like her strong opinions were obviously like, this is a huge crisis. We need to do something
Yeah,
about it. We need to take action. And you were like, all right, fine. Like, go do that in your little bubble or niche or whatever, like that kind of thing, right?
yeah, pretty much. So it was, fascinating to listen to, but that's not how I developed a sense of caring about it. And then at some point, I was flying on a plane from San Francisco to Zurich, and I watched The Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore and started scratching my chin. And then I was flying back, and I watched the sequel to The Inconvenient Truth and started really scratching my chin. Then a few other things, I started learning more about it. For example, at one of Google's internal trainings, I met Dave Fork, who is one of the climate energy scientists at Google. Google has people like that in house. So I met him and I asked him, like, Dave, is it really true that what they say that it's that bad? And he was like, oh yeah, it's really bad. Somebody better do something about it. So I came in contact with Dave. I read some books. I read some like pretty, uh, even more strongly opinionated books about it, and just the whole thing added up to a sense of despair. That like, wow, things are really falling apart. They're really falling apart, and it felt if emotional, like it felt like I was, staring Moloch in the eye. Moloch is the mythical deity that I think some people interpret this deity as like the force that creates evil out there in the world through actions of no one in particular. There is a famous essay called Meditations on Moloch by Scott Alexander, and it also made a big impression on me. So it felt like staring Moloch in the eye. Like I see this force that is destroying us through the actions of nobody who is in particular who is trying to destroy us. And it was scary, and really it was terrifying, and I didn't know what to do. So then COVID hit. In the middle of that, COVID hit, and like everyone else, I was also feeling very anxious that we're all gonna die. There's this terrible virus going around. Everybody's dying.
It's like
You know,
Moloch squared, basically, I guess, right?
yeah, Moloch squared. And then I came across an open source project focused on building an affordable ventilator for the lungs. And through that project, I met some climate people, some of whom actually have been with work on climate since day zero. And then also around that time is when I saw that my colleague Cassandra from Google AI posted something on Facebook implying her interest in climate. I didn't know she was interested. So I hit her up and we started talking, and really basically one-upped each other into quitting very, very quickly.
Yeah. And we'll get on to the what happened next in a second, but I kind of want to go back a little bit because I find it interesting how you characterize kind of like you really didn't have much of a conception about it until basically the inconvenient truth came along, and then it became something that you really started to care about. And I mean, I don't want to be presumptuous, but most of my guests are like American or educated through the American college system, basically, more Western European, educated through that system. And I presume growing up in Russia, there's maybe like a less of an understanding, less of an awareness about climate change, essentially, in the standard education and higher education systems there.
Yeah, I have. I don't think I've met anyone who has uttered the word climate while I was in Russia.
Right.
Yeah, there was zero, nothing at all about it anywhere in my education system. And I think to this day, like many, if not most of the people I know who live in Russia and who I have not indoctrinated myself, they think that it's not a big deal, or they think that it's fake.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Well, if I can ever one day have Al Gore on this podcast, I'll have to talk to him about how many people, he's caused the scales to fall from their eyes because, people like you basically who didn't come up in these kinds of systems where climate change was like part of the background noise almost, maybe something that would be far off. Now it's obviously not far off, but something that we should still care about. And so you really really swung into it mentally, at least, through kind of this exposure, essentially like this one moment, this airplane ride that you took, which is quite unique. Now, well, let's go back to that moment in 2020. So you're working at Google still. We're all working remote. People are feeling very lost, adrift. Don't know. Don't quite know what's coming next. Uncertainty. And you worked for a ventilator. How did you find that opportunity? Like, where did that emerge?
Yeah, actually, that was actually when I already starting my climate path. So I remember precursor to that was that I was talking about my newfound climate concern with my teammate, and he said like, I heard about this company that's doing something about climate with AI. The company is called Camus Energy. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I applied to them, and then I didn't get the job, but I met some cool people through the interview process. And one of those people, he actually shortly after they interviewed me, they fired him. And he was like, hey, Eugene, I got fired from Camus Energy, but enjoyed connecting with you. I'm actually involved in this ventilator project now. Do you want to join me?
Interesting. Eugene, I just had I had Astrid Atkinson of Camus on my podcast recently. So I'll have to send you that, and we can link to that episode in the show notes too. She's a very impressive, incredible, inspiring person. But anyway,
Also,
so that's how the ventilator project got started. I mean, you can imagine a world in which you quit Google, decide that you're kind of like going to go straight into, helping, I don't know, improve public health or something, right? Because that's like where the mission lies. But you said you'd already sort of started this climate journey, but were you still at Google at the time? Like,
yeah,
as
I
an
was still at
employee?
Google, so I was basically moonlighting on this ventilator project as a volunteer. And actually, the reason I bring it up is that the moment I started working on that project, my anxiety about COVID went away. And all of a sudden, instead of worrying how we're all going to die, I was worrying about, the bugs in the ventilator that my code has introduced and how to fix them. So a completely different vibe. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I felt that way, but about climate? If rather than thinking how we're all going to die from climate disasters, if instead, I was actually doing it. And, that's kind of where I am now, where instead of worrying about how we're all going to die, I worry about California labor law and fundraising.
Yeah, I feel like that's really the magic key in a way. I mean, like, we can all sort of point to the work that we do as a part of the solution to climate change, even if the individual job is not necessarily going to necessarily move the needle all that much. But for ourselves, almost, when we think about how do we translate anxiety and fear into action, it's the doing rather than the thinking, essentially.
Yeah, it's the doing and it's the being with other people.
Right, exactly. So, okay, so you and a colleague decided that you were basically going to take the plunge together. Was this like, did you feel like you wanted to start work on climate together, or was that your project and then she had her project? And how did that interaction
Yeah,
proceed?
when we quit, we didn't know what we were gonna do. We just knew that we're gonna dedicate some time to finding what we're gonna do. So work on climate came together organically. Basically, when we saw that so many people want to switch their careers into climate, we figured, why don't we do something to help them? And we thought that it probably would be cool to create a community. And so Cassandra, with whom I was quitting together, she is absolutely superhuman at doing things quickly, like doing simple things quickly that are disproportionately effective. It was her idea, and a lot about how we run it was her idea. She's really brilliant, and so we started it, and it took off.
Yeah, it took off from basically a LinkedIn post. Is that right? That you said got 500,000 views.
Kind of, yeah. So that is how we very quickly built ourselves a climate network, because among these people who were reaching out, maybe 80% of them were people who also want to work in climate, but 20% were people who are already doing something important in climate, and they were like, "How can I help?"
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, a lot of the people that I talk to kind of have to get over their imposter syndrome, I guess, to not to, to put it bluntly. Did you feel like you were kind of ready for this when you first started? I mean, how did you kind of like become a climate practitioner, get the knowledge and the sense of expertise that to make yourself feel comfortable to really, take that hard swing?
yeah. So honestly, I'm not a very humble guy. So I didn't feel that much imposter syndrome at the time. I felt that this is, new and exciting. It's like a candy store of things I can learn and people I can learn from, and possible things I can do. And I think I had a lot of actually misplaced confidence in where I can really make a contribution. It took me a while to really unlearn that the confidence of an experienced software engineer about just how much they know about the world and how to fix the world's problems. At the time, I had not unlearned it. So at the time, it was just really exciting talking to people and learning stuff. And I think I built most of my understanding of how climate related systems really work just from talking to people. There was actually not even that much reading. It was mostly talking and then maybe like reading a paper or two related to what I just talked to someone about.
This talking and learning that you were doing when you were still at Google, or you kind of left already, but like what was there? I mean, I presume like there's kind of a gap between the work on full on work on climate, sort of inception, and your exit from Google. Is that right?
It was basically immediate at the same time. So both of these happened in July 2020. I think maybe we like, maybe my formal last day at Google maybe was in August, but before that was a period of not working, just a period of vacation. So it was basically immediate. Yeah.
Wow, how did you decide like, who to talk to, where to turn to, how, like the people that you wanted to connect with? I mean, was it mostly just incoming from that LinkedIn post, or like how did you structure that?
Yeah, it was incoming from that LinkedIn post, plus asking them, who else should I talk to, and just using our judgment about what seems interesting. For example, at some point we thought that like maybe there is something in climate finance and climate risk that software engineers like us could make a difference in. And so we like started paying particular attention to people who are in that space and asking, following their leads more closely. And throughout this time, actually, Work on Climate was more of a hobby project. We were spending maybe like 50% of our time on that and 50% exploring, what we're really going to do. And then it was not until the end of 2021 when actually Cassandra already left Work on Climate. She ended up taking a software job in climate. But me, I realized that like what kind of force, positive force out there in the world it could really become if it goes beyond just helping individuals in the community. It kind of dawned on me the kind of systemic impact it could have. And then I went all in. And then it was 100% of my time from then on.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, do you still have that LinkedIn post? I'd love to share it in the show notes so people can take a look at it.
Go for it.
Excellent, great. Well, we'll handle that after the recording. Um, so between 2020 and 2022, it wasn't a full-time thing for you. I mean, how did Work on Climate actually form as a group, an organization, a community? I mean, I don't even know what you really call it now.
Yeah. Yeah, the way it formed is so we decided that we want to do it. And then, as we met some people we liked throughout this process of constant networking, we asked some of them, like, do you want to do it together with us? And several people said yes. So that forms the original Work on Climate team, which later became the Work on Climate board. And just over time of its development, it was an escalating level of organizational development. It started from this tiny volunteer team of people who have never even managed a team, none of us, much less been involved with a nonprofit. And then at some point, we recruit more volunteers. At some point, there are so many volunteers that we need to form teams of volunteers. At some point, we start needing team leads. At some point, when I go all in, I start fundraising, and now, it's time to hire the first staff person. At some point, it's time to hire the first full-time staff person, and so on. So it just, it's a hobby project gone way too far.
Yeah, I mean, you as a software engineer who never managed a team suddenly found it's a non-profit, right? Like a 501(c)(3 officially. Was it just, the like drawing from the wells of self-confidence that you have and learning by doing, just starting to like, Google a bunch of like, how do you start a nonprofit? Or like, was there, yeah, just walk me through that process a little bit more.
Yeah, it was, a lot of it was drawing from the wells of very misplaced self-confidence. I think only now I'm starting to actually understand how to really run a nonprofit. So there was a lot of falling on my face, and there was a lot of falling on my face where everyone else sees that I'm falling on my face, but I don't see it. So it was a rocky path for sure. But yeah, throughout this path, like how did I learn? Yeah, I learned by doing, learned by talking to much smarter people that I've met, learned by having people on my board who were at least kind to point some of the things that I'm doing wrong and that I could be doing better. I had a board member, Richard, who I think among all the people I worked with, he's probably in top 3 people who have influenced me the most. He has the wonderful combination of being very kind, but very direct, like very direct. If I'm messing up, he's going to tell me exactly how I'm messing up, and he's going to tell me that I should be doing it differently. So it often would take him many times to get something to get through to me. But eventually it got through to me. A lot of it got through to me when Richard was no longer even on our board, but I'm very grateful to him.
Do you remember like a specific piece of advice? Mentorship is one thing I like to explore sometimes in this podcast when I have time to ask a guest about it. So this sounds like a really interesting case study. I mean, you brought up Richard. Richard, can you share his last name?
Kim.
Richard Kim. Okay. What did he actually tell you that you feel like was the game changer, if there was anything like that?
Um, Let me think. There were many things. There was. I think he helped me get into the mindset of prototyping and experimenting. While in my whole engineering career, I was solving things, once and for all. I come up with I look at a complex problem. I realize how to really solve the whole thing. And then I just built that. And I thought that that would work in the realm of in the realm of building a nonprofit that serves people. Obviously, it doesn't work. So there were many, many times when Richard was telling me, like, Eugene, you have this grand strategy, but like, how do you know it's going to work? And I'm like, well, I just know. I think it's going to work. Get off my back, Richard. And then it wouldn't work. And eventually it got through. So that was one thing. I think another one was just pointing out how basically Richard was not the only one who was having those questions. And I don't think that at the time I was reacting in the most healthy way to other people's critique. And Richard was pointing out that, like, Eugene, like this person, they actually have a good point. Quit steamrolling over them.
So I guess that sort of leads me to ask the question of like, what was your vision for work on climate at the time? I mean, when you first started, it seemed like this kind of snowball effect, almost an accident, if I may say so. How did you envision like the first 5 years of the organization? When you first were starting it
Yeah.
out and getting your board together and whatnot.
Yeah. So the moment when I decided to go all in was probably in December of 2021. At the time, I was actually doing I was trying to do a climate and AI startup together with someone else, and then later by myself when our working styles didn't align. And I was thinking, I really need to go all in on this climate AI startup, and therefore I need to hand over work on climate to someone else. I even told my board, like, guys, I'm going to do this startup. I'm leaving. I'm going to help you with the transition. And then I spent 2 weeks just sitting and thinking, how I should write a strategy for work on climate so that the next person doesn't, mess it up, so that my infinite wisdom does not get lost. So I sat for 2 weeks and thought about it. And what I thought about at that time is that, like, wow, if we ask ourselves how many people need to be doing something different in order with their work to solve climate change, that is measured not in a few thousand people, but in hundreds of millions of people. It's really, the whole workforce needs to be doing something different and rebuilding their industries. And then the vision came to my mind that, like, imagine if every school taught people about how to work on this, right? Like, if it didn't just teach people about climate, but if it taught people about how to build solutions to the climate crisis. If, every conference in every industry had a climate track, if every job had a filter for climate jobs and a job board had a filter for climate jobs. So I wanted to integrate, climate work into the world of how people find work and how people get ready for work. So got really inspired by this vision and came back to my board and said, no, just kidding, I'm back. I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life.
So it was in the process of getting ready to hand it over to somebody that you realized, wait a second, I'm actually the right person for this.
Yeah, it was pretty much that.
It was again, drawing from that infinite well of self-confidence. Very, very admirable trait. So how did funding work, especially in those early times? I mean, you said it was essentially volunteers at first, people just putting in their time. How did you actually start to get a proper self-sustaining business model together?
I started asking my buddies for money. So
that can work, I suppose.
Yeah, it did not come easy to me. I think we probably got our first check probably in April of 2022 from somebody who was a longtime member of Work on Climate and a founder of a climate startup. So that was our first check, if I remember correctly, maybe $10,000, which it's something. Then I started. It was a lot by the time, and I started thinking about how to really fundraise for this. So recruited some volunteers in the community, one of whom later ended up working with us for a period of time as our first paid staff, Nicole. And then, then it just became clear that I need to go around and ask people for money. And I would, we made a pitch deck. I started going to people and telling them, like, imagine if the whole workforce ecosystem had climate embedded in it. And many people were inspired by this vision. They were also inspired by what the community has accomplished. And they would give us money. This was also still largely during COVID, when a lot of people were, their minds were on social impact. So there was that. And we raised some money. And then at some point, we came across the Cisco Foundation, who really liked our work. and that was our first six-figure check. So yeah, that's basically how. And fundraising also took me a long time to learn how to do it, and I don't think I'm anywhere near the people who are good at it for now. But we get by, and I'm learning, and I'm now in the company of people who actually are good at it. So I'm learning from them.
So you continue fundraising through, I guess, like, philanthropic kind of concerns and
Mhm.
just those kinds of avenues,
Yeah.
essentially. It's like a regular cycle still for Work on Climate. Is that right?
Yeah. We're currently maybe like 99% philanthropically funded. We're trying to grow the 1% to something like 20%, but given the type of work that we do, it's never going to be 100%.
Right. So let's talk about that 1% then. What is the other sort of aspect of Work on Climate that is sort of actually business model oriented?
Yeah, so right now we have a program for Work on Climate members that's called Find Your People. It's a program that helps people who are new to climate build a community of peers and like-minded people around them. So helps them meet the right people for them. And it costs $15 a month. And right now, I think we have, if I'm not mistaken, like 22 or 25 people paying for it. So it's certainly not anywhere near Work on Climate's $700,000 per year budget, which is, it's a small nonprofit. It's not a lot, but it is a lot more than we're currently making in earned revenue.
Yeah, and then obviously, you talked about the $700,000 year budget. Let's talk
Yeah.
about the full scope of the Work on
Mhm.
Climate programs and initiatives now. So you have like the one essentially revenue generating piece, and then what
Uh-huh.
are all the other? I know you have a jobs board, you have a Slack channel. Like, yeah, paint that
Yeah.
picture, please.
Yeah. So really, what we do for people through our programs is we help people meet the right people and get the inspiration, the knowledge, and the exposure to opportunities that they need to turn their work into a lever for climate. And it happens through a variety of programs. So yes, we have a Slack community where people can talk to each other, can ask questions, introduce themselves, or talk to people who have introduced themselves, and so on. We also run hundreds of events and workshops, and thousands of people come to them that are featuring success stories of people who have started using their work as a climate lever or founders and so on. Various kinds of educational events and workshops. We have a mentorship program where you can simply come and book time with people who are experts in some area of climate for free. It's right there on our website. It's called Expert Office Hours. We've been experimenting with a few other programs, like we have been running a peer mentorship program. Basically, you huddle up in a group with a couple of buddies and you go through a structured cadence of activities together. We have some programs for founders, also piloting them. And so that's what we do now. That's what we have been doing until this point. But right now, we're going through a significant change in how we approach our work. And this change was also precipitated by a big change in how I see and what it takes to solve climate change that happened over the last year for me. So maybe it will be interesting to talk about that.
Don't leave us hanging,
Mhm.
please.
Yeah, sounds good. So a year ago, I think almost exactly a year ago, I came across a podcast by Daniel Schmachtenberger. So Daniel Schmachtenberger, I don't know what to call him. I think best thing to call him is a philosopher, but he talks a lot about the concept of the polycrisis and metacrisis. Um, for those in the audience who don't know what this is, basically the polycrisis is the idea that we're facing so many crises at the same time, like climate change, breakdown of democracy, rising inequality, existential risks of AI, breakdown of global collaboration that could lead to a war, and so on. So we're facing so many crises that we stand zero chance of solving them all one by one. At least if we solve them one by one, one of them is gonna kill us all. The concept of the meta crisis is, the good news to that, which is that they're really the same crisis. So they're all the same crisis, which is our lack of ability to solve collaboration problems as humanity. So all of these are really just different instances of the problem that the prisoner's dilemma or the tragedy of the commons, where there's a big problem, and if it's just you acting, it makes sense for you to screw everyone else over. But if everyone does that, everybody is screwing themselves over. And if people just collaborated, it would be good for everyone. So this is the good news. Anyway, so that plus the other things that he talks about in his podcast really gave me a better view of systems thinking. And I, again, stared Moloch in the eye, but this time it was a lot scarier because this time the answer of we just got to get enough people into climate jobs was not adequate to the task. We're not going to solve this by getting people into climate jobs. And we're not going to solve this by building climate companies. This is not really counteracting the kinds of forces that we're dealing with. An analogy that comes to my mind these days is, if you want to fly, and you approach flying by, growing a lighter horse, without realizing that what you really need is an airplane, and building an airplane requires an entirely different approach and technology. So for some time, I was wondering, am I even doing the right thing? Should I even be working on climate? Or should I be, should I, again, hand it over and find a way to work on something that has the potential to counter these systemic forces? The forces of extractive capitalism. And I imagine some people in the audience, they might tune out like, oh, this guy's talking about extractive capitalism. Here we go, another activist. But like seriously, that's what it is. This is the gravity, the gravity that pulls things down on Earth. This is the force that makes it make sense for everyone to destroy systems instead of and just extract profit while you can, as opposed to banding together to restore the health of the systems that everything depends on. And no amount of building profitable climate startups can change this. Like you're not gonna, point the gravity upwards by building a lighter horse. Right? It requires a different technology. So after some amount of soul searching, together with our board and team, who all were really resonant to this idea that like what we're doing, it's not going to work, we realized that there is a couple of answers to what we can do about this after all. So one answer is that rather than helping people find existing opportunities in climate, we need to help people become leaders of transformation, leaders of systemic change within their companies, within their industries, and within their communities and other spheres of influence. Because really, these 35,000 people that are in our community, and anyone who is listening to this podcast, you're more than a talent pool, right? You're not just a place that startups can hire from. You have so much more to offer, because people in all industries, they know it's not just skills that they bring to the table, but also authority, influence among their peers, understanding of how to make things make business sense in their industry, knowing the right people in your company and in the industry, and so on. So what this really is, it is a source of power. It's not a source of skill, it's a source of power, not necessarily in the political sense, but in the sense of moving things in the world. Not just doing something that somebody pays you to do, but really transforming things. And so our new approach is all about that. And then we ask ourselves, power to what end? To build what kind of world where really, where gravity points up and where the economy is not extractive, but, something that constantly regenerates itself. And the answer is a regenerative economy. This is a fascinating concept. When I came across this concept for the first time, I ignored it because I didn't get it at the time. Just, how screwed we are and how important is the concept that I'm looking at. The second time I came across it, it was at the right time when I was soul searching. And this is the idea that and in an economy, all economic activity must strengthen the health of the systems that the economy rests on. The economy that we have today is built on the assumption that it's sufficient that transactions are good for one person and good for the other person. And it assumes that if we just do that, the health of the systems will follow. Or more like what it really assumes, that if we just do that, let's not talk about the health of the systems. We don't talk about that here. And the regenerative economy, it's based on the principle that no, like the economy must be structured so that all activity does this by nature automatically. Not because people want it to be good, but because that's the only kind of activity that makes business sense in this type of economy. Just like, for example, in our body, the purpose of all activity in our body, all metabolic activity, all other kinds of activity, its purpose is to keep our body healthy and alive so that we can accomplish meaningful things, right? Like there is the point of activity in our body is not to make blood go as fast as possible, and it's not to grow a very large kidney. In fact, if you grow a very large kidney, there is a good chance that you're going to die and your kidney is going to die with you, right? So the concept of regenerative economy takes this concept to the whole economy. And how can we build an economy where this is true? And it's not really that hypothetical. It's not that much of a pie in the sky idea. We have had economies like that for most of the history of when humanity had economy. The modern Western economy is not like that. But for example, how many indigenous societies lived, that's what they did. Their economies were constantly regenerating the health of the systems that they live in. That was a core principle. And there have been many, many principles throughout humanity, so many cases throughout humanity's history when we solved these tragedies of the commons. In fact, an economist named Elinor Ostrom got the Nobel Prize in economics just for documenting how we did that. It's doable. We have simply lost the art of how to do it, or more like we're simply not doing it. Right. And we could do it. And if we did it in combination with the incredible powers that we have developed now, the technology that we have, the infrastructure we have, the way that AI can accelerate all of that, we stand a real chance of solving this thing. But we got to apply the right tool, and the right tool is the concepts of regenerative economy. So I apologize for talking so long about this. I hope that this is helpful. So what we're doing now with work on climate is asking ourselves, how can we mobilize the power of people across all industries to together transform their industries to be regenerative, to have this trait of improving the health of the systems in which they exist.
Wow. Well, that was quite a discursion, I would say. I guess I mean the goal is worthy and big. What are the actual practical steps that you and Work on Climate are taking?
Yeah, the steps that we're taking are, roughly as follows in order from, very concrete and understandable to the longer term vision of how it will really create that kind of transformation. So what we're doing right now is we're changing our programs from helping people find existing opportunities to helping people become leaders, and helping people build relationships with each other, because it's impossible to lead alone. And as cliche as it sounds, it really is impossible. You're going to face too many setbacks. So you need to do it together with other people. You need to do it together with other people who are in the same ecosystem as you, in the same industry and in the same place. And you need to be collaborating with each other. So the first layer is this leadership development and community building, relationship building to an even greater extent than we did it before. The next layer is coordinated action. So getting groups of people who are in the same ecosystem, in the same industry, and in the same place, but in different parts, at different leverage points in the system, getting them to act together towards a common vision. And this is how systemic change happens. If you read one of the very few books about how to actually do systemic change, this is how. Like this is the methodology. You get people in the same ecosystem to act in coordination, and really this is it. That's what you do. So this is the next layer. And then the next layer after that about how do we create, systemic change with this level of transformative potential to, not just, decarbonize buildings, but to make buildings, the whole area of buildings regenerative, to make the economy regenerative, to really flip the incentives upside down. Well, that requires something more powerful. So that requires us to build these kinds of coordinated action networks that are not simply about reducing emissions, but are about changing incentives. And for that, we need different or new types of networks. We need the types of networks that Elinor Ostrom was writing about. And I think we're going to need many types of networks and ecosystems that have not yet been invented. But that is the task ahead of us. So the path for us lies like this, activate people and like weave this fabric of the movement, then, demonstrate that we can get things done together through the power of this movement, and then start getting really powerful and innovative things done together through these networks.
So it really sounds like the whole concept of working on climate is a little bit of a red herring in a sense. I mean, what you're saying is that it's not about finding a climate job, starting a climate company. putting climate in the top of your LinkedIn profile, it's really systems change at like the fundamental root and branch level.
Yes, yes, I will actually say a little bit more about that. To those of us who think that the way to make the biggest difference for climate is to find a climate job, really to win a climate job, considering how competitive they are and how few of them are remaining, I say don't do it. Because this is like restricting yourself to this choice. It's bad for you because you probably won't find one. And it's bad for climate because even if you do, all you did is make sure that someone else doesn't get the job. So there are some rare cases where it really is a good idea for you to be looking for a kind of a pure climate job at a pure climate startup working with pure climate people. And the case when that is true is when you really bring something unique, where if the company hires someone else, they will be really missing out. For example, if let's say it's a climate startup doing decarbonization of making low carbon concrete, right? And you are an experienced salesperson who has been spent your whole career in the construction industry, and you have relationships with everybody who buys cement, and you know how to sell to them. You know what they need. So if it is you in the position of the salesperson of the company, it will be a game changer for them. With you, they will be successful. Without you, they will have to do with something less. Then yes, by all means, go and like you're the unicorn who should be looking for a pure climate job. If you are, for example, a UX designer, I promise you that climate startups who need UX designers, they can find a UX designer. It's a disappointment for you if you don't get the job, but climate is going to be fine. And I don't know if I'm going to make some enemies by putting it this bluntly, but really they're going to be fine. So it is much more important for you to ask yourself, where can I make the biggest difference compared to someone else who would be doing that work? And let me give a couple of stories. I know, Michael, we're going to be over time, but hopefully that's okay.
Totally
So,
fine.
so one story. My friend Kyler, he is a finance guy, and when he was looking to do something about climate, certainly he could have been looking for a finance role at a climate startup. But most of the time, for those roles, they're going to be fine. It's most of the time it's not the hardest part. Sometimes it is the hardest part. For example, like CFO level people who know how to do project finance for first of a kind manufacturing facilities. Yes, if that's you, you're worth your weight in gold. Go, please find the best company that's going to use your talents the best. But most of the time, that's really not the hard part. So what he did instead is he joined a building inspection company that wasn't doing anything about climate. And as part of joining them, he got them to start a line of business focused on inspecting buildings for the possibility of energy efficiency retrofits. If they hired anyone else, they wouldn't be doing that. But because they hired him, he has made the difference. Because they hired him, now they're doing this. Another good example, our vice chair of the board, Zoe Samuel, she was a UX content strategist at Google, nothing to do with climate, nothing to do with being an executive or anything like that. So she didn't have any appreciable degree of power in the naive sense of the word there. And what she did, she started Google's community of employees focused on climate called Anthropocene. And they weren't simply making strongly worded statements to executives to please do less AI or please recycle our trash and compost our food waste in cafeterias. Instead, they were working and still are working with Google's business executives to help incubate climate focused features, products, and lines of business. And they've played a big role in the fact that today, over half of the projects at Google X actually are focused on climate. So Google is not just being less harmful because somebody led a successful campaign to recycle your trash, or because somebody convinced Google to do less AI or like to invest in energy efficiency of that. But Google is using its power to drive climate solutions. Certainly, and I think everybody would wish that it used it even more. It's using a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of its power, but it's still a lot. So great example as well. And the third example I'll give. So somebody I talked to is an architectural photographer. And also she was looking for a way to make climate impact. If she was looking for a climate startup that really needs an architectural photographer but just can't find one, and if not for her, they're going to be left without an architectural photographer to die out there in the cruel world, it's not a thing. No startup is hiring an architectural photographer most of the time. So she was wondering, like, what do I do? Like, am I shit out of luck here? And the answer is no, because as an architectural photographer, she works with architects and she works with asset building owners and so on. So what she can do is learn how do green solutions, climate solutions look like in the built environment. And then next time she comes to a client, she can be like, nice building you got here. Did you know that actually if you install a heat pump in this kind of building, it will probably, in this kind of climate, it will probably save you this much money. I have 5 other clients who have done this. I can connect you. Right? So this is an example of how somebody who, few people would associate an architectural photographer with power and influence, but it is right there. Right? That power and influence is right in front of our eyes there.
So you are essentially trying to create the well of self-confidence and self-starterism within people, to not just sit around and look at job boards all day, but to actually to do the work immediately in a tangible way that they can touch and feel today, tomorrow, right away.
Yeah, we need to make things happen that aren't already happening, right? uh, if there is a job out there, that means somebody has already done the hard part of making it, integrating it into some kind of business model that can fund the job. That was the hard part. Most of the time, filling the job is not the hard part. So if you want to make a difference for climate, you need to be doing something that wouldn't have happened at all if not for you.
Yeah. So given the sort of very broad canvas upon which you work and work on climate operates, what is your vision now for the company? I mean, it sounds from this long discussion about the systemic change. Like that's great in a manifesto, but like, what do you actually want to see work on climate evolve into? Like, what does success look like for you in 5 years?
Yeah, we're a movement builder. We were previously calling ourselves a workforce developer. We're a movement builder. So what we're talking about, mobilizing lots of people to lead some kind of change. In our case, the change is transformation of practices in their companies and in their industries. This is what a movement is. So the vision for work on climate is to build this movement, and these movements are always more effective if they are organized in many chapters that do very particular kinds of context dependent work in their own area. So our job is to help people do this kind of action from wherever they are and help facilitate the formation of these chapters. So we're essentially doing two kinds of leadership development: helping people develop themselves as leaders of transformation of their industry, and help people develop as leaders of chapters that organize this kind of work. And then as we do this, we eventually it takes on a life of its own, and the people who organize this work no longer need us to help them.
And we're in a time right now where the political cadence is obviously quite different than when you sent that LinkedIn post like 5 years ago or so, and the social cadence is also somewhat less friendly toward these kinds of engagements and these kinds of initiatives. How do you and the people that work on climate, and kind of how do you feel like the community can and should overcome this? Is this temporary? I mean, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when it comes to the political times that we live in, so this was really the catalyst for us to shift our role from essentially implementation support for climate policy, making sure that there are enough people to work on the jobs that it has created, to realizing that policy is not going to save us. Even the policy that was there, like in retrospect, it's obvious that it was going to be taken down at some point. It simply was not resilient. All right. So what we are doing is essentially an answer to that, which is it's a new source of power for the climate movement. So our contribution to the climate movement is to create a new source of power for it, so that we're not dependent for systemic change on begging politicians to do it for us, and then hoping that it will stick. It will not stick. Eventually, when the industry develops, maybe it will stick, but only when it's going to be a while. It's not going to happen under Trump. It's not going to happen on a timeline that is at all satisfactory to us. So that is my relationship with the political climate of the times. Basically, the relationship is policy is not happening. We need to do it ourselves, and we can. So that's how we do it, and that's how you, the audience, do it. When it comes to the social cadence, I don't know, Michael, are you referring to the fact that it is becoming like less fashionable to do something good as opposed to like hiding in your cave and just making money, or are you referring to something
I
else?
guess so. I mean, the fact that like, climate and woke and DEI, I mean, they're all kind of lumped together in these sort of like, it's like who cares about that stuff anymore, right?
Yeah, well, we work with those who care. And I think that in order for somebody to be a plausible leader for the movement, they need to be the kind of person who keeps caring. So, yeah, if somebody dropped out, fine, you're not one of us anymore. Come back when you are.
Right, right. And you, having thought deeply, acted a lot,
Mhm.
working hard in this, very mission driven and very difficult kind of space. What is your, I guess, like you wake up every day thinking, I need to do X, Y, Z.
Mhm. I wake up every day thinking I need to raise money.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is 100% of my job right now, maybe 95%. But yeah, so like honestly, right now my mind really is with operational concerns, because what we're doing now is it's big and it requires more resources than we have right now. It's at this stage it doesn't require 10 times more resources, but it does require 2 times more resources, and that is now a doable but time-consuming task for me to do. So that's what my mind is busy with. In terms of what next, I mean, my mind is clear. My mind is clear that pretty much what I just described is what we need to do. So we need, to raise money for this and then put this money to work to help people become leaders, help create chapters of people who lead together, and then in a couple of years start creating innovative forms of these chapters that flip the incentives in the economy.
Yeah. And I imagine, I mean, there are many people out there who, have leaned on work on climate, who have encountered the organization, who really admire what you've done so far, and I presume would admire, the vision that you have, for the organization and for what you want to do personally going forward. What are some points of advice that you give people now? I mean, aside from, don't just look on a climate job board anymore and take that job. Like, what are advice for people that actually want to do what you do, essentially?
Mm. I think, I give people basically two pieces of advice. One is what you described, which is look for places where you can make a difference and make something happen that if not for you, it wouldn't happen. And then I, give people more detailed advice about how that applies to them in particular. But the other piece of advice I give people is build a community for yourself. So meet other people. Don't try to do it alone. And again, it may sound like a cliche, but it is very, very, very important. Like, do not overestimate yourself. A community of other people who care about the same thing and who have your back, that is what's going to keep you in this movement. Right.
Yeah,
So
and looking back, I mean, like it sounds like, again, with the sort of boundless well of self-confidence that you don't really have regrets. You basically saw every step as kind of leading to the next, and every role, even though the pre-climate ones have been worth it for you to build up to the Eugene you are now. But if you could go back, and I want to say, sometimes I ask the guests to go back, really early on and tell themselves something that they would want to know, but maybe like right at that time, that maybe right after you watched Inconvenient Truth and were thinking about climate, or you were starting to think about work on climate, you're writing that LinkedIn post and getting all these reactions, like tell yourself three, two or three things that you would have wanted to know about the road ahead.
well, I certainly wish that I knew a lot earlier that market-based climate solutions alone are not going to do the trick. uh, so it was do regret that it took me 5 years to realize that, or 4 years to realize that, and another year to figure out what to do about it. um, Yeah, I wish that I understood that earlier, though I don't know if I would have been prepared to deal with that. Uh, yeah. What else? I mean, I do also wish, obviously, that I had started doing something about climate earlier than I did, because every single year makes it not a little bit worse. It makes it like really, it reduces our chances of survival, period. So I do wish that I had started it earlier, because, if I started, even a year earlier, I probably would have, in the grand scheme of things, my impact would probably have been twice the amount that it's going to be.
Yeah, and I guess, how do you think about building the biggest possible movement too? I mean, like, what does it mean to like get work on climate this, especially this new aim in front of people and really getting them thinking about that? Because for a lot of people, even people who want to work on climate, they're in this sort of market-based system as you were talking about, and there are plenty of people who just don't really think about it, even if maybe they're concerned or it's in the news, but it's not part of their thinking.
Uh-huh. I think there are enough people for whom it is part of their thinking. So, um, I mean, on one level, you're right. We actually did research that shows that even among climate concerned, climate alarmed Americans, only 12% of them even understand that you can do something about climate through your work. And that's the 12% that we work with. And then among those 12%, very few understand that you can actually lead, rather, even if you're not an executive, rather than just, competing for a job. So, um, I'm sorry, Michael, I forgot the question you were asking while I was
Building the biggest possible move, bringing
building.
people in who are not your target audience,
Mm.
basically.
Yeah, I think that that's not something that we need to be concerned with right now. There's still a massive amount of professionals who do care about climate. So they are eager, they're yearning for to be empowered to actually do it. They're yearning for someone to come and say, like, do this. Here are the people you can do it together with, and then things will start flowing. And like, you don't need 100% of a population to participate in a social movement. You need several percent, and we have that several percent. We just need to equip them.
Yeah. And as a final question, I like to ask all my guests, and this is sort of back to Eugene, the just the putting on your navel gazing hat as much as you can right now, thinking to the end of your career. Work on climate has essentially become what you want it to become. What would you want people to say about your contribution specifically, and what would you want your, I guess, climate epitaph to be?
Yeah, I would want, I think, my climate epitaph to say that, thanks to the work on climate, uh, industry transformation through the action of professionals became a mainstream form of climate action and ended up making a big contribution to the movement as a whole. So I hold no illusions, like it's not going to be the thing that saves us. Work on climate is not going to be the organization that does it. And I'm not necessarily going to be the person inside Work on Climate that makes our contribution either. Like, systems change does not happen through solo heroes. And that's also something that I had to realize probably way too late. But I do hope that I can, look back and see that at least it has happened. And then I can, fantasize, good Eugene, it happened thanks to you, while understanding that it didn't really happen thanks to me. But I do hope that it will happen and that we will have a broad movement of people transforming their own industries rather than waiting for, for a politician to do it.
Well, and like they say, if you're gonna dream, dream big, right? May as well. Great. Well, I think that's a wonderful place to end. This was a really fascinating and rich conversation. So, Eugene Kirpichov, thank you so much for appearing on Climate Swings.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Michael. This was great.